Hey everybody, welcome to the Burning Man Veteran Panel. My name is Lynn Morski. I'm host of the Plant Medicine Podcast, founder of plantmedicine.org, and president of the Psychedelic Medicine Association. Prior to my work in plant medicine and psychedelics, I was a physician at the Veterans Administration for 9 years. So this topic that we're going to be talking about today is very close to my heart. Just a quick announcement before we begin. For those who are working with patients in any capacity, psychedelic or not, I'd love to invite you to take a look at the Psychedelic Medicine Association. We're launching in about a month, and our goal is to bridge the gap between the psychedelic science world and the medical establishment so that we can get these important medicines to more people. So if that describes you, you work with patients in any capacity, please head on over to psychedelicmedicineassociation.org for more information. All right, now on to our esteemed panelists. Nick Betts is a professional photographer and Army veteran who grew up in the Southwest. Nick developed his love of photography at an early age while taking photos of his friends skateboarding. After studying professional photography in school, Nick enlisted in the U.S. Army to help pay for his school loans. Nick's love of photography continued through his military career. In 2016, Nick was first published in Esquire magazine, which featured photos he had taken during a combat deployment while on patrol through the kinetic streets of Ramadi, Iraq. After leaving the military, Nick now uses his creative skills to empower businesses through photography and experience marketing. Nick was recently published in Coffee or Die magazine in an article titled Burning Man Through the Eyes of an Army Sniper, where he details his life-transforming experience at Burning Man. He's since become a regular burner. Jesse Gould is founder and president of the Heroic Hearts Project, a 501c3 nonprofit pioneering psychedelic therapies for military veterans. After being deployed in Afghanistan 3 times, he founded the Heroic Hearts Project in 2017 to spearhead the acceptance and use of ayahuasca therapy as a means of addressing the current mental health crisis among veterans. The Heroic Hearts Project has raised over $150,000 in scholarships from donors including Dr. Bronner's, and partnered with the world's leading ayahuasca treatment centers, as well as sponsoring psychiatric applications with the University of Colorado Boulder and the University of Georgia. Jesse helps shape treatment programs and spreads awareness of plant medicine as a therapeutic method. He has spoken globally about psychedelics and mental health and received accolades, including being recognized as one of the social entrepreneurs to watch for in 2020 by Cause Artist. Driven by a mission to help military veterans struggling with mental trauma, he is best known for his own inspiring battle with PTSD and his recovery through ayahuasca therapy. Dr. Pate is a neurophysiologist, lover of mountain sports, entrepreneur, and yogi. Her research career began over 13 years ago, born out of a fascination with the brain, but specifically the brain-body-breath connection. In addition to the neural control of breathing, Kate has conducted research in the fields of neurotrauma, arthritis, cancer and radiation biology, human performance, mental health, and military combat trauma medicine. Work aside, Kate comes from a military family and has always been passionate about finding ways to help military service members and veterans. This passion, coupled with her interest in plant-based medicines and her journey to find ways to heal from her own traumas, led her to cross paths with Jesse and Heroic Hearts Project. She immediately knew she wanted to be involved in the organization and help further the mission in any way she could. Kate joined Heroic Hearts Project as the Director of Research in early 2019 and has been working closely with the team to secure research funding and design rigorous scientific studies focused on investigating the ways in which ayahuasca can benefit veterans suffering from PTSD. And finally, we have Amber Capone. Amber is the co-founder of VETS, which stands for Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. VETS was founded in 2019 by Amber and her husband Marcus in response to the growing veteran healthcare and suicide crises. Marcus is a former Navy SEAL, and he separated from the military in 2013 after multiple combat deployments and quickly realized that the subsequent years would be wrought with escalating hardships, misdiagnoses, and a desperation to find meaningful solutions in addressing these mounting challenges. Seemingly out of options, Marcus underwent a last-ditch effort, entheogenic treatment outside of the US, which he attributes to saving his life, marriage, and family. Less than a month after undergoing his profound healing, Marcus began sharing his life-transforming experience and raising funds to assist others in dire need of help. This began the initial grassroots movement that would go on to assist over 100 special operations soldiers in achieving this same remarkable healing, several on the brink of suicide. VETS Incorporated aims to support the special operations soldiers seeking unconventional healing by utilizing the power and promise of entheogenic medicines. Vets intends to shed light on root cause veteran health issues, many stemming from mild traumatic brain injury, while also advocating for psychospiritual healing and finding powerful antidotes to addiction. Welcome to all of you today. All right, we're going to get started by asking Jesse if you could let us know a little bit about your military history and your service and some of the struggles you were having after separation.
Of course. Thank you so much. That was a great introduction, Marie. Good to see you again. And welcome everybody from the Burning Man community. We hope you get a different insight or a veteran insight of things that we're all passionate about, I think, here. So my background, touched on it a little bit in the bio. I was an Army Ranger, which is a special operations unit in the U.S. Army. And that included 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan. And overall, I would say I was fairly lucky. There's the normal op tempo and stressors of combat deployment, but nothing that you'd see in the movies necessarily happened to my unit. So I always count my blessings there. But no matter what, just going through the military and what you are exposed to, and not only on a psychological level, but also the physical level in terms of concussive force and all sorts of wear and tear, I found myself post-military in a situation where increasingly more days I was unhappy than happy. And that's a pretty bad formula to live your life. And no matter what I tried to do, I had a great job, good social life. I was going back to the gym, getting in better shape. I was learning to cook. I was doing, the checklist and the dark cloud I just couldn't get around. And, just severe anxiety. Sometimes I'd have to miss work because of panic attacks, depression, self-medication with alcohol, just not going anywhere with my life. And fortunately, I've always had this intuition, and at that moment in my life, it became flaring. It was like the bright red beacon that, hey, if you don't make some major life decision or life change, that you're going to eventually do something that you can't take back, some sort of irreversible path. And, that was what led me to ayahuasca. Wasn't my background, but for some reason, the two things came into my life at the same time. And sometimes you just have to listen to the signals.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jesse. We're going to get to what you tried before ayahuasca and then how things were different after your ayahuasca experience in just a minute. But I want to turn now to the other veteran on our panel. Nick, could you tell us a little bit about your service and how it led to what you felt was an attitude that wasn't serving you post-separation?
Yeah. So I enlisted in 2005, right after high school. I originally tried to go in as a combat photographer, and then in 2005, obviously that's kind of like the super heat of everything for that matter. And combat photographer was not an option. So they only gave me 2 options. They said you can be a cook or you can go infantry. And flipping burgers in Baghdad didn't really sound too appeasing to me. So I went infantry. And really had no clue or context as to what I was getting myself into. Opted in for the readily deployable unit. I got sent to Germany, and then 6 months after I got to Germany is when I went to Ramadi. We ended up doing a 15-month tour, kind of partnered up with SEAL teams, and then after that knocked out another 12-month tour, and then went to Afghanistan. And then during that time, Ramadi is kind of when I was working with a lot of sniper teams, and I decided that is the route and the avenue that I wanted to go. And so I did 8 years total, ended up spending the large majority of that within a recce unit as battalion sniper section leader. And after I got out of that, I went right into executive protection in LA for various celebrities, CEOs, CFOs for another 2 years, kind of babysitting billionaires. Got out of that and really tried to kind of get my foot in the door to reassimilate back into civilian life. But my resume up until this point for the past 10 years read nothing but military and sniper. And so nobody wanted me. I mean, I put out probably 140 resumes. All my resume was vetted through various CEOs that I was friends with to make sure everything was on par. And I never once got a call back. Nobody gave a flying shit what I did. and I didn't know what to do. And it was to the point where like I was scraping pennies. I even had to ask my parents for money, and finally kind of decided to pull the trigger and then went contracting for Blackwater. And then I went contracting for Blackwater, and that actually was a pretty large catalyst in getting like my foot in the door, trying to like make good money again. And it changed like my psyche. I became super selfish about making money, never trying to be like on the bottom ever again. And it just made me very selfish and very arrogant, and wasn't conducive to like having a healthy marriage. It wasn't conducive to having healthy relationships back home. I was gone 9 months out of the year, you know, so it was 3 months there, 1 month back, 3 months there, 1 month back. And it just, I wasn't becoming a good person. I wasn't able to like maintain healthy relationships back here in the States. And I knew that like there kind of needed to be a change. And that's when I first watched a documentary over in Baghdad on Netflix about Burning Man. And when I first saw it, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. Like, this isn't a festival, this isn't anything. But I knew like there's a little bit of me that like wanted that. Like, I wanted to see like what that was. And I had no idea what it was, but I wanted to go like full send like on into it. Um, and there's a lot more story behind that.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate you sharing all of that. All right, now we're going to move on to Amber. Amber, if you could speak a little bit about how you and your children were affected by Marcus's post-separation struggles.
Absolutely. I feel like we were not expected for the war that began in our home after Marcus's war deployments. And I think we naively assumed that we would pick up where a normal family would, and just be like any other family of four. It was nothing like that. The transition was horrendous. And I felt like, you know, initially there was a lot of guilt and shame and, you know, things flying around in our family. And then I realized that maybe this was a struggle that really Marcus couldn't help. And so being able to see him through new eyes gave me enough bandwidth to figure out ways that I could begin helping him. And initially it was very Western approach, but that wasn't working. And our family was really, really struggling. We had 2 teenagers at the time, and it was very, very challenging, especially for our son.
And something I want to clarify, because I think a lot of people hearing this, the panel and the things we're discussing, might think that everything that we're talking about is basically PTSD or PTSD related, but Marcus's bigger issue was traumatic brain injury, correct?
Yeah, so Marcus had a history of 15 years of tackle football, followed by 13 years as a breacher. And his struggles, he was only diagnosed with PTSD. And of course, the only weapon against that in the military is pharmaceuticals. And he was just being prescribed cocktails of medications that were making our situation actually worse. So during this time when our life was in complete free fall, I was thinking, you know, this should be getting easier every year. If it's just PTSD, every year as civilians should be a little bit more normal. And it was getting actually worse. And then I began to see that his neurocognitive functioning was really, really compromised. He was forgetting things. He was flying off the handle. He had massive depression, anxiety. But it was really the neurocognition that started to concern me. He tried wrapping a Christmas tree with lights, and he couldn't figure out which end plugged in, what plugged together, where does it start, where does it stop. It was just like his brain was not working. And that's why we tried a lot of brain clinics. During this time also, I got word of the first SEAL brain autopsy that showed a very disturbing pattern of blast scarring. So, you know, this is very common amongst military members. And that's what shifted our focus from, this is not psychological condition solely. There's no amount of talk therapy and prescription drugs that's going to make a difference here.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. And with that, let's move on to our neurocognitive expert here, Dr. Pate. Growing up in a military family, had you experienced family members going through these post-separation issues? And did that have anything to do with you getting into this area of combat trauma that you focused on in your studies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I come from a military family, and I have 3 older brothers, 2 of whom served. And one of the ones that I was closest with growing up, he was a medic in the Army in the SOF community, Special Operations Forces. And he was in the military for 12 years. And, you know, one of the things that I noticed being so close to him growing up, we were like best friends. And when he joined, we were still fairly close in his training years, which took a while to go through all of the different courses that he needed to go through and everything. But when he started his deployments, I noticed that he started pulling away. I mean, first of all, when he was gone, he couldn't communicate. That's kind of normal. But it was when he would come back that just that connection that we shared and how we used to talk about everything, it just kind of stopped. And I could tell that he was very different, which I kind of expected at the time. I had our oldest brother who was much older than the other 2 brothers and I. He was involved in the Gulf War, so he was 18 in 1990, and he, you know, right out of high school, getting his diploma, just, you know, ended up going and serving on a Navy ship, and he was out in the Persian Gulf. And his transition, we were a little bit less close, but I could tell even with him, there was a part of him that was just kind of shut down, but I didn't see it firsthand because I was so much younger. And it was really my other brother that I was closest with where I really got to see that. And again, it was like I had kind of expected some of it, but didn't really understand it. And of course, being the person I am, I was always trying to understand and wanted to talk. And these were things that, you know, with each deployment got worse and worse. He didn't want to talk about it. He had some really intense experiences, lost a few friends, some of which were, you know, in his care as a medic. And that was really traumatic for him. They were in a lot of firefights and, you know, got ambushed. And he came out of all of that with just being a different person. And I've always wanted to kind of reconnect with him in so many ways. And I think that because he was a medic, that got me into the field of emergency medicine and combat trauma and wanting to understand that to enable my brother to do his job better. But I think seeing the transitional stress and seeing the toll it took on his family, he's married with 2 children, seeing that toll that it took on his family also was, you know, really motivating to me to want to understand this problem set. And then of course, all the work that I do, I have just crossed paths with so many people who are still active duty or who are veterans. And I would say that makes up the majority of my close friend group these days. And they're all struggling with something. And it's this massive problem that really made me feel like I not only just wanted to understand it from a scientific perspective, but what else can we actually do? What can we really do to help these people? And help people not only recover the quality of life, but just really heal from all of the things that they've experienced. And so that's what's been driving me to understand alternative approaches to healing and to mental health. And to Amber's point, and to your point, Lynn Marie, too, about TBI and PTSD, they share many symptoms. And so they're often, you know, people are misdiagnosed and they're given the wrong medications. And so I think that even just spreading awareness and education and advocacy is something else that I'm really passionate about. So for people listening, these are, you know, this is something that is really rampant within the veteran community that everybody is affected by, not only the people who serve, but their families as well. And so these are really complex situations that we need to, you know, provide more for these people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you pointing out the overlap in symptoms between those 2 conditions, because if somebody's out there watching and they're like, I just assumed I had PTSD because that's what kind of everybody just assumes, oh, that I went to combat, I have PTSD coming back, but it may be another thing. So hopefully that will get some people to maybe examine those diagnoses they've been given. Now let's go back to Jesse. So Jesse, in your journey, you know, you come back and you realize that there are things that you need to change, and you go to address them in the traditional way. So what did you initially try, and then what led you to trying ayahuasca, and then how was that different? How were the results different with that therapy versus the others?
Yeah, and quickly, I want to add on a little bit to what Kate was saying as well, is that, and this is not just systemic to the veteran population either. And often veterans, the community tends to be almost a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the population. There's a lot of these stuff that veterans are struggling with. They're in these extreme lives of combat and then going back to civilian. So in terms of psychological and in terms of physiological, a lot of these people that a lot of the veterans that are experiencing, it's in the rest of the population as well. And you're seeing that massive mental health crisis, probably because a combination of, somebody might have had a car accident and didn't necessarily know how much that was affecting them or what have you. So it really is a whole society value to learning more about these. And so to the question, when I went back, like I said, I try to do it through my own means as much as possible, not trying to get help from anybody is a pretty military sort of perspective to have. But, I just found myself, hungover before work or having that, pep up beer to get to work. And I just had that situation of like, something's wrong here. Like, this is not a normal situation. And, I could still maintain this apparatus, but on the inside, I knew it was going bad. And so finally I got to the point of like, all right, well, the VA's there. They say I can go there and ask for help. And so I did that and got the appointment. It was kind of a pain. Went there, got to see a social worker, and I listed all the things I did, all the self-help and everything. And she was like, seems like you're on a good course. And I wasn't willing to go on medication at the time because, like I said, I felt like overall I had things under control. And she said, honestly, and to her credit, I guess, she was like, hey, if you're not willing to do the whole protocol that we offer, including medication, there's not really that much we can do for you. We're sort of at a rope's end. We have too many people, not enough therapists. And I just wanted to see a therapist, just to have somebody to talk to see if that would help. And she said that I could go to group therapy, but that was for some very severe people, and it might be a little tough to get through there. So, I mean, essentially I walked out of that office a little bit frustrated, but also with this idea of, if I'm going to get over this, I need to figure it out on my own. I need to like start researching, do all this sort of stuff. And similar to, Marcus, Amber's husband, and a lot of other veterans, a lot of your mental health is almost like self-diagnosed. It's like the WebMD of, somebody in the family of like, hey, did you see this CNN report? Maybe you have this, because and that's such a ridiculous concept for it. So anyway, I went to that. I also, because I was a mortarman, so exposed to concussive force, that was intriguing of like, hey, why didn't anybody tell me that these explosions obviously near my head are doing something? And looked at other avenues, and just, I think out of sheer boredom, I had heard about ayahuasca and I was like, oh, that's not for me. That's whatever. Started looking into it, and just from an anthropological or like historical cultural level, it was intriguing because it dates back, thousands of years, and there's this whole ritual ceremony. And so I think that's really what allowed my brain to be like, okay, maybe in the right circumstances, if I happen to stumble on an indigenous tribe that offers me this, just sort of these weird situations of like, okay, yeah, in that situation, I'd definitely do it. And that eventually, with the culmination of more and more bad behavior or unhealthy behavior on my part, was like, all right, you already have this in the brain, now or never. Like, you're not happy in this job. That this is not where you need to be right now. There's nothing keeping you here in your life, which again is a bad sign. And so I was just like, okay, well, let's go. I've never done anything like this. I've never experienced. I have no idea what I'm getting into, and I'm probably a little bit crazy, but took that leap of faith, again, following that intuition, which fortunately I did. And so I guess kind of briefly touch on the other side is, went there, did some research, found like a spot I trusted, went in very skeptically, obviously nervous as anybody going through this would be. But it was a great group of people, really settled the nerves. being in nature, being outside the US was very refreshing, of like getting out of that bubble of looking back of like, oh yeah, I was making some pretty stupid decisions back then. And the first ceremony, the first two were pretty tough for me. They were like all out war. And, you know, part because my inexperience with psychedelics, but part, there was that part of my brain that just needed to like control. Like I was no longer in control of this and I had to be okay with that. And that was a lesson that I needed to learn. And learn I did. So I got to that point, and through the whole ceremony, just that toughness, one, gave me respect for it. It was beyond my conceptions. My stigmas drastically changed. I knew it wasn't just a recreational, like get high and escape. But two, there were some pretty significant lessons, and also just physically the way my brain felt afterwards, the way it sort of shaped it and unloaded this burden from me was beyond explanation, and continued on for months afterwards.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I think you experience what a lot of people experience when they're in their first time. It's like, I've heard this thing, it sounds shady. And then the more you hear it and hear it, you're like, there may be some credit, but then it's still like, when you go down there, it is still a whole thing of letting go and getting over your own nervousness about what am I taking and this kind of thing. So that's why I really appreciate when you all come forward and share your stories like that, so that other people don't think they're the only person nervous to try that, or I come from this conservative background, I wouldn't do this thing. Like, this is so important to share these stories, because we all have that same, you know, anybody who grew up in kind of a very conservative background is like, am I doing this? Am I doing this? But then there's so much science behind it. So appreciate you sharing all of that and how well it helped you. Amber, what had Marcus tried before psychedelics for his symptoms that were probably mostly TBI? And how did the outcomes from journeying with psychedelics differ for him?
He had tried mostly Western approaches in terms of obviously medication and talk therapy. I think that by and large, they're very good soldiers. And so if this is the only tool in the toolbox, then they're going to, you know, be good soldiers and take their pills. But it wasn't helping. Things were getting worse. The TBI element in this, you know, the brain autopsies started coming in showing blast scarring. And so there became this like push to go to all the brain clinics and turn upside down in a chair and have, you know, magnets shocking your brain. And some of those things definitely did do something, some good, some bad. He tried hyperbaric oxygen. He was struggling so badly at that point that each failed attempt put him in such a dark place. It was like getting darker and darker and more hopeless. And I knew that he was a ticking time bomb and I was going to lose him. And at the same time, it was becoming unsustainable for me and for the kids. So going back to your first question, everything changed when my daughter said, how much longer do we have to do this? And I didn't ever think at, you know, what the toll, you know, what toll is being taken on them. And then I thought, well, I've got to choose my children. But in doing so, I knew that that would basically guarantee that Marcus would be a dead man. Perhaps somewhat selfishly, but also because I loved him so much and I never ever wanted to leave him. I thought, I've got to know that I tried everything, because I'm working today while he's still walking around living and breathing. I'm working today on giving myself for what could potentially happen if I leave him. And then I remembered one other person that had done an entheogenic treatment outside of the US. And I thought, this is all I've got. This is all I've got left. And so I worked behind the scenes to arrange for Marcus to go. At that point, he thought that it would be like everything else and it really wouldn't make any difference. And I didn't know if it would or not. I just knew that we needed a miracle and he didn't have much time left. And it was worth a shot, because I had to live knowing that I either had or hadn't done everything I possibly could. I've been with Marcus for over half my life, before he was a SEAL, before there was 9/11 or, you know, the conflicts overseas. And I hadn't seen that person in a really long time. So I was fighting for him, you know, this person that hadn't existed. I just prayed and hoped that he was still in there somewhere and something could bring him back. And at minimum, we were just so desperate that something could just stop the spiral and save his life and get him on solid ground. And that's exactly what the treatment did. We knew nothing about psychedelics. We knew nothing about, different modalities or no prep. He just showed up. And even with that, it completely saved his life and changed his life forever.
You started turning around those neurologic deficits that you were seeing?
Absolutely. There were three main takeaways. Marcus was numbing a lot with alcohol because of the frustration, because of the embarrassment from his, neurological deficits. And he no longer had the urge to drink, which, was huge. Even that benefit alone would have been amazing. But he also had this deep, deep psychological purging. They weren't, memories and recollections from war. It was very much rooted in childhood and adolescence. And the return of his cognitive functioning seemed like a complete, added miracle. All three categories just blew my mind.
Wow, that's so fantastic. I'd love to turn now to Kate and ask for you to talk to us a little bit about what science is showing behind these neuroregenerative and also psychological healing powers of these entheogenic medicines.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people who've kind of taken a little bit of a dive into the neuroscience understand that a lot of them are acting on the serotonin system in the brain, and specifically they exert their effects via a specific receptor, this 5-HT2A receptor. And what's really interesting about the way that psychedelics act is most people think that they, because they activate these receptors, that they just cause massive activity in the brain. And what actually happens is that they deactivate the main control centers in the brain that are normally responsible for directing traffic, neural traffic, if you will. So the control centers are specifically responsible for these patterns. So addiction is a huge one, but just even maladaptive stress responses like what PTSD is, or negative repetitive thinking, all of these hardwired systems that are in the brain that over time have become stronger and stronger. The control centers in the brain are kind of directing that, and they're sort of just perpetuating it. And so what psychedelics do is when they activate this system, they actually kind of shut down those centers, which then stops these very specific and repetitive circuits from happening, and actually allows for global connectivity in the brain. So more of a, you have certain areas of the brain that are communicating that hadn't before. And it's like, I've heard it described this way before, but when you're riding your bike on a soft dirt road or a muddy road, you create a little rut. And the more you keep going on that rut, the deeper and deeper it gets. And then the harder it gets to actually get your front tire out of that, to take a different direction and go explore something else. And the same thing is true with your nervous system. And so psychedelics have the ability to almost smooth out all those ruts. And in doing that, it allows people to kind of wipe the slate clean and to view problems in a new way. So instead of solving the problems with the same old toolbox and the same old patterns and the same old way of thinking, it's almost like you can take any number of infinite approaches to looking at a problem in a new way and seeing it differently. And I think that's really powerful for things like post-traumatic stress disorder in particular, but for any kind of repetitive behaviors where you need to try to break out of that pattern and solve it in a new way. When you're feeling discomfort or when you're concerned or scared, instead of going, reaching for the bottle or whatever, you can choose a new healthier outcome. I think also what's really interesting is that psychedelics appear to be extremely anti-inflammatory. So through the same serotonin system, they are anti-inflammatory. And what's really important about that is following neurotrauma, so traumatic brain injury, whether it's blunt trauma or blast trauma, you have this massive inflammatory response in the brain. And that perpetuates a lot of these really awful symptoms and prolonged degradation over time. And so to be able to use these as anti-inflammatories for your nervous system is pretty incredible. And I think that is also one of the things that's great about that is it's ayahuasca in particular also promotes this anti-inflammatory pathway through the gut because it's ingested. So some other types of entheogens or psychedelics that are smoked or not consumed, not eaten orally, they have this anti-inflammatory effect. But ayahuasca in particular is very beneficial because it also does that by affecting your gut microbiome. And so shifting your gut microbiome to a profile that's more anti-inflammatory in nature is one of the hypotheses that we're exploring right now at Heroic Hearts Project. But we think that that's also potentially where they could have their effect. So I think those are just some of like the basic neuroscience ideas behind how it's helpful through the serotonin system, but also so that global connectivity that I mentioned, neuroplasticity, is kind of the buzzword that people hear. But one thing we're also understanding is that some may also have the ability to promote neurogenesis. So the birth of new neurons from the stem cells in the hippocampal region of the brain. And that's hugely profound because for people who have had any kind of head injury, to have this hope that not only can you rewire the system that you have, but that you may be able to regrow to some degree, especially in the memory centers of your brain, some neurons that are that maybe weren't there before because of injury. That's incredible. And that, of course, we need to prove out over time, and that's in its nascent stage of exploration for research. But these are all things that are really promising, and the effects that people are experiencing, whether it's PTSD or TBI or any other number of mental health struggle, it's just, it's incredible to hear. And the neuroscience and the research behind it is catching up. So it's pretty cool to be able to see at that level of what's going on and have that support these experiences that we're hearing about. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I could talk for an hour about all this stuff, so I'll just stop there.
You will. We'll have you on the podcast. But everybody tune in for more of Kate on the Plant Medicine podcast. Excited to have you on, and because this is a really, like you said, it's a new field where we're learning more things that maybe, and so like there's all these areas of, okay, is it the anti-inflammatory? Is it the neurogenesis? Is it this entourage effect of all those things happening at the same time, which is really exciting. So thank you for giving us a little dive into the world of neuroscience there. We're going to head on over now to my fellow burner, Nick. Now, Nick, you had your first psychedelic experience at your first burn where you took a large dose of LSD. Can you tell us a little bit about the insights that you took away from that experience once you went inward?
Yeah, so my first burn, ex-wife and I decided to go to Burning Man, got the tickets. I mean, I even bought like a 20-foot travel trailer for like 13 grand because it just, as opposed to renting, it just sounded like a better idea to buy. And at this burn, we ended up driving up with a guy that like we didn't know at all, and he needed to ride from San Diego up to Black Rock. And as we were going up there, my ex-wife and I, like, we had no idea where we were going to camp, who we were going to stay with, like nothing. It was just kind of like super ad hoc. And our buddy Danny invited us into his camp, and so we stayed with them. And the whole burn, I was very much like trying to like make it about me. Like it was like my burn, didn't care about like my wife's burn. She was like coming down with like heat sickness and stuff. Like it was a pretty hot year there. I believe that was in 2017. And I decided through various campmates that gave me LSD. I was like, all right, like I'm just gonna, here we go. Like I'm gonna do full send. And I actually kind of like unintentionally took 2 hits as opposed to like 1. But during that, like, so there was a lot of conflict like between my wife and I at the time because I was just being insanely selfish. And so I took these 2 hits, and first time ever taking LSD, and it just fucking kicked me in the face. I was like, holy shit, like unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. So aside from like the visuals and everything like that, I just went like down this wormhole. Like I was holding on to her, like laying in my trailer and like trying to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, like I was like traveling through like the universe. And I told her, and I was holding on to her, I was like, don't let me go. Like, don't let me go. She's like, okay, because my fear, like in my psyche at the time, was if she were to let me go, then I was going to go so far down like this wormhole that I was traveling through that I wasn't going to be able to come back, which in my mind thought like I was going to be like perma fried. And I didn't want to end up like, you know, some kind of like boomer, I'm trying to think like hippie counterculture kind of like shit to where like you're just fried and like you're never the same. And I didn't want that like to be the case. So once like those kind of like visuals, you know, expired, I went outside and I was like, I'm just gonna like go like through the playa and try to, you know, just meet people and go do things. But I realized I was not mentally capable to do that. And so I just sat there in a chair in our camp in the middle of the night. It was probably like 3 a.m. No one else was around. And I just started kind of like crying to myself because I was starting to begin to like self-internalize everything about me. Like, and this almost became like literally like a battle between myself and like my like normal sober self. I realized how selfish I was, like how bad I was in relationships. You know, not only just like my marriage, but like my friends. Everything was like about me. And I realized the level of like arrogance that I had, the level of like judgment that I passed on everybody, and these standards that I was holding everybody to, because the level of arrogance came from, I did this, I did X, Y, and Z in my military career, and I frowned upon anybody that didn't do that. And like, that's not good. Like, everybody needs to like choose their own path in life. And like, who the fuck am I to hold anybody to a standard or to judge them because like they didn't do what I did, right? I mean, essentially, I had a full-ride scholarship to Arizona State. I had a full-ride scholarship to Arizona State for golf. They got pissed away via a cigarette. Literally, like, shot a 69, smoking a cigarette. This guy like dimed me out because of the school function, no smoking policy. Like, I got DQ'd, kicked off the golf team, scholarship withdrawn, like, hence why I went to the military. And so I realized like that was your route, like that was your avenue, and holding everybody else to this like super high standard of you should have done this, you should have done that, is like completely unacceptable. And the level of humanity and acceptance that I saw at Burning Man was unlike anything that I've seen before. And I just like, just tears are streaming down my face, like sitting in this chair. And I really just kind of had like this like come to Jesus moment of like, unfuck yourself, like stop judging people, stop holding them to the standard, realize that everybody has chosen their own path, and like that path might not be yours. And I, as soon as I like came out of that trip, I just became a better person. Like, I just stopped judging other people. I started accepting everybody for who they were, you know, gay, straight, fat, skinny, whatever that may have been. And it's carried on with me since that. It's made all of my relationships better. It's kind of like awoken me to like understand like a level of humanity that I needed. And I didn't know that I needed it. I didn't go into this trip like with this like goal of I'm going to figure shit out, or, you know, I got demons in the closet like I need to handle. And this was the night before I went to the temple, which was like via my article, and then going to the temple and then reading, you know, notes in there of girls talking about being molested by their dad, of guys coming out as being gay that weren't accepted by their family, and like kind of like putting all this like hate and pain and anger just kind of like on blast and like leaving it out there. And it was mind-opening, absolutely mind-opening. And I'm a better person because of it, absolutely.
And then at the end, I'll say something like, that's fantastic. I love that story. Thank you for sharing, Nick. And this is where I'm going to put a little plug in for if anybody is a regular burner or going to burn for their first time, please check into the Zendo project. You can volunteer there to help with harm reduction. And essentially you get to sit with people who are going through these journeys. Nick sat by himself, but a lot of times people are by themselves and then they realize, whoa, I would really like some support right now. And so they go over to Zendo and you get to be there and you're trained on how to support these people going through what could be very life-changing journeys for them. So take a look at Zendo Project if that interests you. All right, now we're gonna head over to Jesse one more time. And your experience with ayahuasca had led you to start and to found Heroic Hearts Project. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, after, I think it's a pretty similar thing after, for a lot of people when they have these profound psychedelic experiences, and, similar to Amber and Marcus, where you see what's out there and just how much more effective this is, even if you just hear it on an anecdotal basis. So the immediate inspiration was like, hey, a lot of veterans I know are suffering. Myself and all my buddies at least know like a handful of guys that unfortunately have taken their own lives. And beyond that, a lot of them are just being eaten away. Their families are being destroyed. Their professions are being destroyed. They can't leave the couch or the house. And so like on many different levels, there's all sorts of different suffering, and the options out there are just really not working at a great level. And so when you see these things that seem to have pretty profound effects and pretty quick effects too, you want to approach it with skepticism, obviously, but you also deserves looking into, because we haven't seen, as Kate was mentioning, some of these effects are pretty spectacular if you know what the current treatments are doing to the brain in comparison. And so that was the inspiration, and that was really, one, providing information. I didn't have any support. I had to do all this research myself. I had no idea about like what's a good ayahuasca center, or just flying there and what should I expect. And even on the pre and post support, the place I had some things to read into, but it really was kind of, you're on your own. And resolving that with just information, and especially in the veteran community, like most professions, there's specific vet speak. There's ways of approaching and communicating to the veteran community that they trust, and that will get the message across. And it can be a very hard thing for outsiders to talk to veterans to get that sort of trust. So I wanted to present the information around psychedelics, around this thing that has stigma in the veteran community, in a lot of these more conservative networks, and bring it to them in possibly a way that is a little bit more approachable, a little bit more straightforward, without any other, things added that don't necessarily need to be added. And then secondly, provide them this container of support that if they decided to go on this venture, that they would have those tools that I wish I had when I was going there. And that's preparation, pre-integration, which I'm sure most people have heard about at this point, but essentially, getting your mind in that right mode, like start looking inward, start reflecting, intention work, eating healthy, all that sort of stuff leading up to it, knowing how to approach this indescribable experience. And then the working with retreats that we trust, that we've verified, that we've vetted. And then the post work where, continued follow-up, integration support. Great. Like what Kate said, your pathway is smooth. How do we prevent you from making the old ruts once again? How do we make you have positive ruts? It's like what I say to a lot of vets. If you go from here and straight back to the bar, guess what? A lot of the benefits of this experience are probably going to go down the drain, and you're probably going to end up in a very similar spot. But if you take this opportunity as like a New Year's resolution on steroids, where you're actually motivated and you actually have the tools and you actually have a community to support you. Okay, let's use this energy right now while it's still fresh and continue this sort of stuff. And you have the edge, because oftentimes if there are these anti-inflammatory effects, the things that used to get you down or spiral down no longer hopefully will have as much of a hold on you. And so you have these new tools, this new way to approach it, where you're not going to hopefully be in the same sort of spot. So it's all this container support. And then obviously with the help of Kate and then some other great people, doing our part to document this, getting the research out there, understanding the different modalities. And I know some people that really connect to the spiritual level are kind of like shying away from that side of psychedelics, but I think the combination of both is more beautiful, because the more we understand how it's working with the brain and how each of these different psychedelics, whether it's ibogaine, ayahuasca, psilocybin, affect different people, affect genetically you, affect different trauma, and being able to go into that full force and knowing it and being better connected to these plants and compounds. I think that's the most beautiful synergy of knowing all these different dynamics and being open to it all. And so, you know, we're just similar to the Capones, trying to also share these powerful testimonials through our own voice, but then also through those that we help, because the way that we get these more accepted is reaching out to the people who are afraid currently of psychedelics, who have the stigmas. And by reaching those groups and letting them know that, hey, it's not as scary as you think it is, you know, most of those urban legends weren't true, then hopefully we can get this path forward and allow these powerful healing modalities to, like I said, not only veterans, but a much broader population around the world that is really in need of more mental health understanding and options.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate your work in that. And I love that you brought up that thing, like the things you've heard aren't true. Any of the things that people have heard of that are negative about psychedelics, often, if they are true, stem from the fact that they didn't have a well-curated experience. And I know that that's what part of what you're trying to do with Heroic Hearts is make sure that people go to experiences and they've got the proper preparation and they've got a good set and setting and they get integration afterwards. So thank you for the part that you're playing in healing the stigma by doing the most that you guys can to make sure that these experiences do go well and are therapeutic and beneficial for the people that undergo them. Now, Amber, like Jesse just mentioned, you guys started VETS after Marcus's experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what VETS is doing?
Absolutely. So when Marcus went through his own experience in 2017, the following month, what would become our first donor contacted Marcus and said, I'd love to give to a veterans organization. Which do you recommend? And he said, well, I actually have a friend who's really struggling, and I just had a treatment that saved my life. I can't give you a tax write-off, but we can give you complete assurance that you're going to save someone as well. And she was completely on board. He had said to me the day after his experience that he said, this is exactly what, struggling veterans need. And so it just kind of happened. It was very organic. And the first goal was 12 individuals over a 12-month period, because we were a little bit gun shy in saying like it would work. We were very hesitant to put our own reputations on something that was so obscure to us and we were still trying to figure out. But on the other hand, it seemed like it was exactly what we needed, and it was extremely beneficial for Marcus. And so we were at about 11 months in of the 12-month until we would, officially talk about it. And during this time, we were raising money, and Marcus was sharing this with his friends and very, very grassroots type of way. And one of my best friend's husbands took his life. And I was sitting in his funeral and I was just looking around thinking, this will be the next wave of funerals. And we've been to too many. Why are we afraid to speak out? Why are we afraid to say that we needed help? Even though the perception was that we had it all together, we didn't. And how many other families must be feeling exactly the same? And so I made a vow right there that I would do whatever it takes. And that meant that we had to really step out of our comfort zone and take this very quiet, very methodical grassroots effort to a larger scale. And so the next goal was 100 veterans and research. So we partnered with a researcher and got to work on a retrospective study, which was just published, and the results were phenomenal. And as we were approaching about 80 individuals and the success stories were absolutely incredible, we decided we've got to come full throttle with this. And so in 2019, we founded VETS, restructured in a way that, isn't exactly like the grassroots effort, but similar in that we provide grant funding for veterans seeking psychedelic assisted therapies in countries where they're legal. And it's wonderful to be able to help, to have feedback like this saved my life. This lifeline is exactly what I needed. I feel completely new. It's amazing. Yet we realize that we are trying to keep water in a bucket full of holes because we are just a small nonprofit. and the need is so great. So it's definitely starting to, you know, make inroads to greater change, but our ultimate goal is to change veteran healthcare.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate your courage. I know that we have talked an hour about everything that Vets is doing. Check out that episode. Check out Jesse's episode. I've had conversations with all these lovely people, except for Nick. But what you guys are doing is incredible, because we've all, in one way or another, dealt with the VA system, the Veterans Administration, and it's very limited at this point in options for people. And so to have that goal to change veteran healthcare is going to impact so many people. So thank you for all that, you know, the courage I know it took to stand up and put yourselves out, because I first met you guys at the MAPS conference, where you both got on stage and you told your story in front of all those people. So really appreciate everything that you're doing to help all these vets. And for everybody else out there, if you are in the service now, or you've been in the service before, or you have family members or friends, I mean, most of us know somebody that is in the service now or has been in the service. My brother is currently. Share this information with them, please, because it may not be that person that you share it with that needs it, but if they have a friend they notice is struggling, then they can pass this on, because it's, you know, we're still working at getting over the stigma, and it's not on the front page of every, you know, Captain Obvious magazine. What do you do for depression? Psychedelics. I mean, we're not making promises, but these are places where people can look if they've, you know, have they tried other options and they haven't worked? Great. Maybe here's another option that can give them some hope, because there's a lot of evidence that these are working for people. Not even just the anecdotal evidence we have here, but like Amber's just said, studies come back that shown these therapies are working over and over. You know, the MAP studies with PTSD have shown that MDMA is really effective, and much more effective than the things we have now. So if everybody watching this could be part of the solution in just sharing this information with the people in your lives that may need to hear it, or that some of their friends may need to hear this, because the veteran suicide epidemic, and like Jesse said, it's not just the veteran community. People with TBI have this from many other causes. People with trauma have trauma from many other causes. The mental health epidemic worldwide is worsening by the day, and these are some solutions that hopefully can give people hope. So please share with your friends if you can. Any last thoughts from anybody on the panel before we wrap up?
I would love to say that one of the most beautiful things that I've witnessed over the last 3 years is the coming together of maybe segments that maybe wouldn't have typically been in each other's presence before. And it is the most beautiful, unifying, exciting thing for me to realize that we are so much more alike than we are different. And so to unite in something that is so worthy and so righteous and just, I think, you know, it's the proper time for that.
Thank you for that, Amber. Anybody else? Yeah, just to go off what she just said, which is very well put. And, you know, there's enough division right now. And this is one of those things of many different communities, many different perspectives can come together on a very simple sort of platform of, you know, let's help people heal, which is a pretty easy thing for people to get. There doesn't need to be anything else beyond that. Like, let's figure out how to get more people to heal.
Yeah, so going into Burning Man, and especially coming from like the world that I came from, Burning Man is so taboo. Coming from like the veteran perspective, the contracting perspective, right? Like the level of humanity, the drugs, the art, like the culture, it is so counter to everything that we were told and kind of ingrained in us that is acceptable. And so when I reached out and like went to Burning Man to find that level of humanity, I realized that like regardless of what we're told, right, regardless of the years and years of like the military, there is this love of humanity out there, and like people are good, like people are wholesome.
Yeah, I echo the same sentiment too. I think ultimately it's this awesome coming together and recognition that sharing stories is very healing, and it's also very unifying, and it creates this incredible space where we get to just do what we do best as humans, which is support one another and come together and be a tribe and be you know, a real genuine community and helping each other heal together, and being open and honest about what we're all dealing with, and destigmatizing all of that is just this, this really beautiful thing can be born out of these awesome hobbies and these gifts of nature to us. So yeah, I'm thankful thank you for having us, and thank you for everybody here who listened, and all of, of course, the panelists, and yeah, just thanks, full of gratitude right now.
Yes, thank you to Jesse. Jesse organized this, and we really appreciate it. Jesse has not been to the Burning Man before, and yet he was the one who got this all together and made it happen. So I really appreciate that, because as a regular burner, it was very nice to have some way to participate this year. And so thank you for inviting me to this. And at the end of this video, or beginning of this video, Jesse will have edited where you can find all these organizations, because if you are feeling compelled to reach out and help with what you have, we know COVID times are rough, but if you've got a little extra and you are moved by the stories today and you would like to donate to these causes, I would love for you to check out their individual pages. All right, that's all we've got for now, until hopefully the next time we see each other on Playa. Goodbye.